Welcome to Issues and Insights. I'm George Pennington, your occasional host. And today we have Professor Terry Owens, retired Lieutenant Colonel, and I believe you're a councilman somewhere in the area, aren't you?
I am. Radcliffe City Council.
And she's kind of shy, and I'm talkative, and I'm going to try to draw her out as best I can. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do it, but I'm going to give it one heck of a go.
Give it a shot.
And today, Terry, you're here on behalf of
the Patton Museum of Leadership, or the official name is the General George Patton Museum of Leadership.
And what would you like to talk about? I just found out you know lots and lots and lots and lots of history about Patton and family. And you've been sharing a lot with me. Go ahead and share with the public.
Family is important no matter where you come from. It may not be the family you want, but it is the family that you have. And so when people look at the Patton family, they know that figure of General George Patton, right? And they think they've got it all in a box, and they know exactly everything. We have people who come into the museum who probably knew Patton when he had 2 teeth and all the way out.
Wow.
And I said, but it's still a person,
yeah,
who had brothers, he had cousins, he got married. He's been in the military basically since birth because it ran through his family. Like a lot of our families where we have aunts and uncles who served during this time, it was all male at the time.
Were your parents military?
They were.
Oh,
They were. My dad retired as a sergeant first class in Marines.
Okay.
And my mother retired as a major in the Army Reserve Nurse Corps.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I have a brother-in-law.
And you grew up in the Hampton Beach area?
I grew up in Newport News, Virginia.
Newport News,
It's called the Tidewater area, right there in the Chesapeake.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So did you retire out of here?
I retired out of here in 2017.
Okay.
I entered in May 1987 as a private first class. I was a combat medic assigned to the 18th Field Hospital, which we don't have too many field hospitals now.
Biology? Was that your area?
My undergrad was in biology.
Yes, I did a little homework.
My master's in elementary education, and while I was in grad school, or my first master's, when I was in graduate school, that's how I got to ROTC. Someone saw something in me and said, hey, why don't you check out the Pirate Battalion at Hampton?
Who reached out to you? Who reached out to you?
It was the Professor of Military Science, but we also call us PMSs.
Okay.
And I bumped into him. I was getting ready to register for courses in graduate school. Now they don't do it that way. Everything's kind of like online, add and drop. Sure. But at that time, we went to a common area in the gym.
Pull out a card.
And I was just thinking, hope I can handle this. And I was married, still married, and a substitute teacher. I had 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And behind me was the professor of military science, and we just struck up a conversation. And he says, hey, you need to come over to the Pirate Battalion. You're prior enlisted. And I was like, no. A week later, it was, yes. And I went there, and there's the story. And I got commissioned in 1990 when I finished graduate school. And I had made my E5 by that time. And then there's no handbook of switch.
Okay.
You just switch. And then I went to jump school. I went to...
Where was jump school?
Jump school was at Fort Benning, which is now Fort Moore.
Yeah.
And San Antonio at the time was Fort Sam Houston. Now it's Joint Base San Antonio.
Been down there. Yeah.
And so never looked back. I hit Germany and some other things. And so my last assignment, or actually what brought me here the first time, was the troop commander of Ireland Community.
Of Ireland. Okay.
Of Ireland.
Gotcha.
Budget, money, and people.
Sure.
Operations. And then the second time I came back was to catch my daughter Courtney to graduate from Knox High because I missed her 10th and 11th grade. Oh. So I came back. I was at
least you sent her to good college.
I did. She went to Western Kentucky.
My alma mater,
WKU, Hilltopper for life. And so I did get to see her graduate. I did see her in her freshman year at WKU, and then I left again to go to Joint Base San Antonio to do some operations side. So I've got an ops side, and so that was her sophomore and junior year at Western. And I came back, Carter graduating, and then I went to the Pentagon with duty here. So I was assigned to the Accessions Division with duty here to kind of be a conduit between recruiting command and cadet command for all the statutes that cover and govern accessions. So I spoke several languages of sessions. I probably could tell you all the platforms. But in between that, Fort Hood, which also has a new name, recruiting out in California. I've been to Germany twice. I've deployed to Bosnia and Afghanistan.
Gotcha.
Been shot at twice, that kind of thing. And so Walter Reed.
Walter Reed, okay.
The National Capital Region is a region of its own. Got to be an aide for a very short time for our former Vice President Dan Quell.
Okay.
And so a lot of us were signed out under the command there within the northern region, the old guard basically.
Okay.
And so when you go into an election year, the months leading up to it and after, which would be the parade itself,
Sure.
we're parceled out on the list, all of the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and it's like, tag, you got that one. And so we're with that person if they choose to use us. So every ball, every breakfast, every meeting at the Capitol, every prayer, down on the elliptical, and it leads up to the parade.
Gotcha.
And then we're sort of released to the hound. So to see how that all comes together, and we're kind of on the hoof and going, where'd you go? We're like, oh, the black tie ball. Where'd you go? I'm with West Point. And so it all comes together.
So how did this lead to your involvement with the Patton Museum?
When I retired in 17, I really didn't retire. I just went on to the next thing. I said service, like for a lot of people's in their DNA. So the first time I ran for Radcliffe City Council in 18, and I knew people didn't know me here, and people would ask, did she go to North Hardin High School?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
did she go to John?
She was class of
What's her
so-and-so.
credentials?
She's a Trojan girl.
Who's her
I know
people?
she's Trojan.
Who's our people? And I just continued to do what I've always done, no matter what community we
Gotcha.
were assigned to, and I just kept doing it. And so later on, once I got elected and some other things where I served on your Radcliffe Red Cross, actually not Radcliffe, but the American Red Cross, your disaster
Right.
action team,
Okay.
and some other things. And so I was on the board for a short time at the foundation last year.
Okay.
And I was asked to replace Michael Martin, one of my peers. He had retired. His wife was still serving.
Okay.
She came down on assignment, and they relocated. So I thought about it, and I looked at my virtual list, and I said, how do I fit that in? Because I was also doing Hardin County Teen Court with the lovely Judge Kimberly Shoemate.
Okay.
And it was just a lot. And I said, I'll try to give you a year, which is what I said to the board. I said, I'll try to give you a year, but do not make me choose between this, that, and the other. Everybody can't serve at the same pace.
Yeah.
And I said, for those who can't get out and do it, or for those who've already done it, put that placard down and stop marching, let me pick up that charge. And so a year came around, June 23rd of this year, and I'll still be there. And so the opportunity to help turn that Titanic of Patton Museum cavalry armor to a more of a regional place that showcases leadership on all different levels, and
Okay.
we now have time to sort of reshape some of the exhibits or enhance the ones that are there. And with the commander of the post previously, who had the forethought to open the gate, if you will, and have a public
Yes.
entrance, because there
That's
are
big.
people
That's
that's
big.
big.
That is.
Because there are people that I've met from, I kid you not, Northern Ireland, Tokyo, Poland, Romania, France, Spain, who probably would not been able to come on if they didn't have some
Right.
some true reason
I got you.
to be there.
I got you.
And now we're not a pass-by kind of thing.
Yes.
We're part of the fabric. And so now when I go to other museums, as I was down at Fort Bragg, which is now Fort Liberty,
Fort Liberty, right?
I went to the 82nd Airborne Museum, and I'm not looking at it as a visitor. I'm looking at it as a technician, and I kid you not, I'm all up against the wall, like, how'd they get that up
Yeah.
there? Why'd they get?
You taking
They're
pictures?
doing
You
this.
taking
I
pictures?
am. And then when I went to the Special Ops one, which is in the city of Fayetteville, whole different thing going on there. And I'm looking at, well, how'd they get that up there? And Speed Art Museum in Louisville, same thing. I'm going, man, they don't have this in the case. We can do this. Oh, that's raised. The lighting is this. I got it. And, you have an affinity. You have an appreciation for the technical stuff that most people don't think about. they just see the end result of
Okay.
it. And I want to be more of a help to our current curator, who is now the director, which is Tyler Reed, who's WKU alum as well.
But there you go.
There you go, another
Okay,
hilltopper.
say no more.
Say no more.
Say no more.
And so I tell people there are two of us there. He's the federal employee, which TRADOC pays under the Center of Military History that oversees all of the museums, and then you have me under the Patton Museum Foundation. So it is two of us trying to look like 20 of us. So as part of my engagement, there's no handbook in a sense. All nonprofit fundraising type of people who are certified to gain more money. There is a book about strategic planning, capital planning, but when you're talking about how do you engage people to bring them in, particularly people who feel like their dreams have been moved because the school moved and we didn't ask them for their permission. So someone would call and say, do you have the T-46? Do you have the 19? And to say no, but we have this, that, and the third. And so I've been asked more than once, how do you showcase leadership?
Okay.
And my response is, we've always showcased leadership. You only heard one name that was saying it, though. You only heard one name that embodied it. But really, you make leadership decisions when you wake up every morning, if you're blessed to get up. Whether you're going to put your clothes on first, what kind of hygiene you're going to do, are you taking your bag, are you driving the car, are you driving the truck, are you going to stop and pick up, something to eat, you got to get gas, and who's depending on you to get there. And I said, leadership happens as soon as that person is able to understand yes and no. So when children come in there, because it is a big place and they can feel overwhelmed like it's an adult place, I try to pare that down, not only getting down physically to where they are, but I have books there and I have toys there.
So you were telling me they do have
We have books
for children?
I have books
Patton?
for children at the Patton Little Free Library. If you've heard of the littlefreelibrary.org.
Oh, yeah.
I have little free libraries between Elizabethtown and Radcliffe, registered chartered ones. So I just
Did
took
not
the
know.
same concept. I had one at Funtopia, as a matter of fact. It was my first one in May 2018. So I just took that same concept and said, what would children want to do if none of this stuff in this building or none of the items in the World War II era barracks, or they don't want to go to the Armour Memorial because they think it's a cemetery and it's not. So I said, I want them to take the experience with them. And so there are books there to read. There are books there because I got to get the education in. So there's coloring books. There are handwriting books. I have flashcards for, addition, subtraction, the first words. And then also you got to have the dinosaurs. So there's dinosaurs in there, dump trucks, fire trucks. It looks like the fire trucks in the 9/11 exhibit.
Okay.
Stuffed toys, things that are easy to wash for the parents. I've had kites and hula hoops and balls and bubble blowers and chalk that they can do what they want to do on the ground. And I always apologize to whoever brings them there. And I said, I take no responsibility when you get in the car. So if this Play-Doh
and I got to throw in
comes
12 bags
out,
of M&Ms too.
right,
I take no
take this
responsibility.
with you. How's that working? And so they kind of have a memory, and when I see someone standing there and they'll take a book, especially the teenagers, and they find something and they're doing this, unbothered, and I go, that's what I'm talking about. Or yesterday when this youngin said, it's my favorite, and I was thinking to myself, I was going to keep that. I was going to keep that for myself. But they will remember it for at least a little bit. It may end up in the toy pile later, but they realize it's also a place for them and not just grown-ups and not just people in the military.
Okay. How did you get involved with the Patton family? Tell me that story. And tell me some of the conversations you've had.
Helen Patton, the granddaughter, last November. She had she contacted Tyler Reed, who's the curator now, director, and she said, I have a chest that I believe belongs to my grandfather. General Patton had 4 chests, filled chests made for him. So there's none other. We have 2 of them.
Okay.
We don't know where the 4th one is. And so she has the 3rd one. It's not hers. A company bought it. But they let her, use it when she's out doing things. Because she gets invited to a lot of armor-related kind of things, right? And so she wanted us sort of to look at it to make sure it was one of the 4. So she came over last November. She looks like her grandfather.
Does she?
She does. It's like a female version of her grandfather.
Oh my gosh.
And she's very upbeat. She knows her thing. She knows a lot about the family, as she should, that you don't hear about, because they're born way after. You know, he passed in 1945. They're way after. She was born in 62, March 62. So she knows what the family knows.
By my standards, a mere youngster.
Mere youngster. And so meeting her for the first time, and then we talk now. She's 6 hours ahead over in France, but we talk now. Benjamin Patton, I met a friend of his who's in the movie production, film production kind of thing. And
now, who's Benjamin?
Benjamin's the 5th kid.
Okay.
He's her brother.
Okay.
Because she's the 4th, he's the 5th.
Okay.
And the middle kid passed a couple of months ago. Then the older son, Robert, and the older daughter, or their sister, is a nun, a full-fledged
Oh, wow.
nun. None of them went in the military. The 5 kids, none of them went in the military. And so the film playwright kind of individual says, hey, do you know Benjamin Patton? I said, no. He says, well, you need to call him. You need to call him. And I said, I just can't call him out of the blue. He says, yes, you can. He says, yes, you can. Here's his number. I did exactly that. I called him. He was in Colorado. I think he was going skiing. And he was like, and you're calling me for what? And then he says,
you said, I butt dialed you. I butt dialed you.
And he says, what do you want me to do? Because I think a lot of people come at him, as the young folks say, come at him for something.
I got you.
And there was nothing I needed other than to say, I will help to continue to protect the legacy that you come from. If I can't do anything else, at least you'll have a name to go with it. Because we had a lot of employees that switched out and left when the school left. I think they had a bustling, crew of like 10 or 12 people.
Oh, wow.
And so he hadn't been there in a while. So he's like, okay. And we didn't talk anymore. And then later on, he called back and he says, you called me. And I was like, and you are? And we started talking. We laugh about it now, but then it was like a rough cut of lots of people who call him. And so since that initial call and then response back call, we text a lot. He was here about 3 Tuesdays ago or so. He lives in Long Island, New York.
Okay.
And he was asked to come to the board, to be on the board, to be engaged. And as he told me, he says, things are about to get spicy. Hang on. Hang on. I said, sir, I'm coming from Spice. I've been shot at twice, and I rode into a minefield. I'm good. I'm with you. Ride the wave. So it is refreshing to see him. It is refreshing for people who come to the museum when he was there. And he has a book out, and people, I said, he wrote this book, and they're like, him? It's like, yeah, that's him. And they wanted to take pictures. Meanwhile, he's moving around the museum like a visitor because there's stuff he hadn't seen. He hadn't been there in a while.
Okay.
But he was, uninterrupted. He was okay with it. And the last time he was with us, other than a meeting, it just happened that we had a grandson, Firth Bowden, whose grandfather, Joseph Angelo, who was the orderly for then Colonel Patton, had saved Colonel Patton, who got shot in the hip when he was in France. And his orderly used his own field dressing, which is not the rule of law, basically. It's not the standard operating procedure. You don't use your stuff, you use their stuff. But he used his bandages and whatnot to stop the bleeding and to curb the infection. And because of that, of course, he got a Distinguished Service Medal for that. He got a very personal gift of a Tiffany watch, gold watch, inscribed from Miss Beatrice and some other things. And so as he's getting older, like a lot of us, he says, my family, I'm not so sure they're going to, feel about it the way I do. I would like to donate it. And we have a process.
Wow.
And so we thought, here's a grandkid. Let's let him meet the other grandkid, which is Benjamin Patton. They never met each other. So at the museum, we bring these 2 grandkids together.
Oh, wow.
Because their grandparents were together, serving together.
Have they ever met each other?
First class, they never met each other.
Met each
Just
other.
heard about each other, but not spending any time. And so those are the things, those bring people together moments is what the museum should focus on. And while we're doing that and doing all the engagement, we have a relationship with the units so they can come and do small unit instructions,
Okay.
or as we call them LPDs, professional development.
Okay.
First Army East was just there yesterday. They spent 2 days
What is
with
that?
us yesterday.
What is that?
It's another Army group, another corps, but they were working on a rehearsal for another exercise.
Okay.
Sometimes real exercise. So it's a rehearsal of concept, a rock drill, ROC.
Okay.
So you have this huge map, on the floor, and you have the units identified by marker,
Okay.
and you have the representatives of the units in the room.
I was
So
Air Force. I don't understand all this
it's-
technical
it's-
stuff.
But
All
you,
this- all
but
this
you were
technical
doing it
stuff.
actually, because when you hand off from unit to unit, or for you, it could be aircraft to aircraft.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that everybody that's responsible for that goose egg really knows what they're doing, because you got other units in. It's easy to read an operational order where it tells you what should be happening. But when you're sitting there, you're looking at your
Yes.
area,
Yes.
and you're going, oh, unit so-and-so is over there, and they are 20 miles from me, and I'm responsible for fuel, food, whatever, and that's them.
Gotcha.
And they don't
Yeah.
pick up that level or that lane of responsibility until you get right here. So you got all of this to do, but you also have to know what's on your left and right. And so they laid
Gotcha.
that out,
Gotcha.
and it's a great way to communicate effort.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is.
So, the Patton Museum,
Mm-hmm.
the emphasis now to make it toward a leadership portal.
To bring it out as a leadership portal, as I said before, it's always been a leadership portal. When you go there, you saw things about physical presence,
Okay.
and your attributes and your personal values versus the enterprise, which is Department of Defense values, and communication and commitment. It's always been there,
Yes.
but you had this stalwart person communicating what leadership is versus everyone that comes there has some form of leadership already in their personal lives, or those who've gone before us. As you come in and you see things about Colin Powell and General Eisenhower and, things like that, you'll see that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Leadership's an interesting
it is.
concept
It is.
because people's personalities are different, their styles are different, their demeanors are different,
You're right.
and the way people lead, that can be so varied. Can be
It's-
so varied.
It varies, and it's an intangible thing, and you always have people who will say, "Are leaders born or made?" And it could be a combination of such, because you can have a leader that has all of the right stuff. You've heard that before. He's got the right stuff, but what made that stuff? He or she didn't wake up making leadership decisions or movements or being able to stomach leadership. There had to be a follower at some point in time, because that's when you learn. When you become a leader, you make or expect to make less and less mistakes.
And it's interesting, like I said, when you walked in, I was downloading the Patton books I'd read a few years back, and how he didn't feel, a kid with learning disabilities and ADD,
Right.
had to redo math,
He did.
at West Point another year,
Right.
and
Right.
traditional academics became difficult for him.
Was. And the
But-
pressure of being a kid,
Yeah.
of that legacy. It's kind of like being a preacher's kid. He was a legacy kid, and he had a lot to live up to.
And he had to train that leadership
He did.
in him. A very conscious,
He did.
very, very conscious set.
His awareness,
to
his self-awareness was on a heightened state of alert.
It was crazy, wasn't
It
it?
was
It was
crazy.
crazy. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
As the kids say, it was wicked. I mean, it really was. He knew once he came about himself and he went beyond his toddler years. It's like, oh man, my dad, my uncle, my grand. I guess that's what I'm going to be doing, huh?
I guess that's what I
I guess
got
that's what I gotta do.
hone those skills.
Yeah.
And interesting.
did.
And being a cavalry guy,
He started
and
out
having to
cavalry
make
first.
that. Can you imagine a cavalry guy having to make the transition to the tanks that he
Yes.
did, and just
And you're right.
It's-
And we always talk about recreating ourselves.
Yes.
And he believed in
he was-
reincarnation as well.
Yes, he did.
And so he was cavalry, and he saw the cavalry change. We weren't going to be led and pulled by horses very long.
Right.
And we had bicycles in there too. And so he's like, we're going to be fighting another world war. I know we are. And we have these things called tanks in the European military. We didn't have it in the Army Air Corps, which is what we were before we separated. Right. And he had enough thought to say, let me send this stuff back to this Camp Knox, which was an artillery range, training infantry soldiers in the city, I believe, of Taylor. Tankers hate to admit that it wasn't them before them. And so infantry, cavalry, and then armor. And also Patton having the wherewithal that says we can't be stovepipe when we do this thing called service in the military. We need to be combined with the specialties, with the leadership, with the decision makers. So he is known as being the father of combined arms, although Chaffee was there at the time, Pershing, Abrams, which is why our auditorium is named after General Creighton Abrams.
Oh, it is named the Abrams Auditorium. Okay.
It's Abrams
Gotcha.
Auditorium. So it's a lot of people that helped, the mystique of the Patton, the Patton comes along, but you also have a Master Sergeant Meeks, and you have a Riley in there, and all these other people that were part of his lives, and you can look up that history. There are a lot of things, and then I realized what we don't have in the museum is when you get to the Vietnam era, which shows his son. Okay. We don't have any women in there. The Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. It's like, how do you show Vietnam and have women in it? So we have to enhance that exhibit. We had the Tuskegee Airmen here twice, learning how to fly. I believe they were the Mitchell bombers to 25s. Okay. Desegregated, though, had a lot of issues as they did when they moved around after leaving Tuskegee. But we have one buried on post, which is Colonel Tyree, Air Force. And his daughters are in Louisville. So, matter of fact, Colonel Tyree and his wife were buried there.
At the military?
On post,
Taylor?
at the main
Oh,
cemetery.
on post here?
On post.
On post here?
Mm-hmm. On post. So you've got to show that kind of thing. And then we are now working on the Pacific Command campaign, not command.
We got 1 minute, so go ahead. Yeah.
So it's time in Fort Knox history. We don't have Fort Knox history. We got to have Fort Knox history.
Yeah.
Just to even tell you why it's named Fort Knox. So we're working on all those things now.
Okay. Well, you're a busy person. I read your background, but at least you had the foresight to go to Topperland. I'm just saying. And
it was a good investment for her. It was a good investment for us. She got accepted at both of the schools. I didn't push her one way or the other. I said, wherever you want to go, you go. And now she just left Cornell University because she was there working in the student affairs. Wow. Yeah.
We got about 15 seconds. And you know what? It was hard to draw you out, Terry, but thank goodness I was able to get you to chat just a little bit. I'm just saying. So, Terry, I appreciate it. And thank you. And sometimes, tell me a few war stories sometime.
Come to the Patton.
Or Patton stories.
Come to the Patton. Right.
For HCEC-TV and Issues and Insights, I'm George Pennington, Professor Terry Owen over there, and you'll never get her to talk. Never.
Never.
All right. Signing out. See y'all later.